We are already more than halfway through the NFL season, which means the fantasy football playoffs are on the horizon. But before we start talking playoffs, you have one last chance to make that league-winning trade that propels you to fantasy glory. Lucky for you, in this video, we will be discussing 11 players that do just that. These are all guys you're going to want on your team prior to your league's trade deadline. So enough yapping, let's jump right in. We're going to start with some running backs, and the first running back on this list is Rico Dowdle. Some are going to say that Rico Dowdle came out of nowhere this season, but that would just be false information. Rico Dowdle was a 1,000-yard rusher in Dallas last season, and the Panthers rewarded him with a solid one-year contract so that Dave Canales could deploy that two running back attack he has always envisioned since taking the head coaching job in Carolina. I told you guys this past summer that he was worth drafting in the later rounds of deeper leagues, but I could have never guessed that he would take the starting job from Chuba and be the third leading rusher in all of the NFL. Rico Dowdle has 788 rushing yards and nearly 1,000 yards from scrimmage while only starting in 4 games. He is the Panthers offense, and for that reason, he needs to be on your fantasy team. In the 4 games that he has started, he's averaged 27.4 PPR points and finished as a top 2 running back 3 times. One of those top 2 finishes came against one of the stingiest run defenses in the league against Green Bay, where he had 28.1 PPR points. And even in a game as lousy as the Panthers played last week against the Saints, he still posted up 15.3 points and finished as the RB14. In 3 out of the 5 games that the Panthers have won this season, Rico Dowdle has had more rushing yards than Bryce Young had passing yards. So let that sink in. He has fully taken over as the lead back in Carolina, and outside of Tenero and McMillan, he is the focal point of that offense. Plus, this is no fluke. Once again, we saw him find immense success last year in Dallas. He's legit. We've seen a large enough sample size, and you can acquire Rico Dowdle without having to trade away everything because his name is Rico Dowdle and not JT, James Cook, or CMC. But you still get that near elite level production for the rest of the season. So moving on, patience is a virtue, and TreVeyon Henderson has tested the patience of the fantasy community for far too long. But that patience may be finally starting to pay off for those who held strong. I'm not going to lie, I was starting to doubt myself for telling you guys to trade for TreVeyon Henderson in my last video, but it looks like we might finally be in business. In week 9, he got his first crack as a starter against Atlanta with both Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson dealing with injuries. He did finish as the PPR RB15 that week with 12.7 points, but it was not super reassuring considering Terrell Jennings was seeing a significant workload alongside Trey. But then week 10 rolled around and Trey went nuclear with 28 PPR points, breaking off for 2 huge touchdown runs and finishing as the RB4. This is the type of game that will earn a rookie the confidence of his coaching staff and team moving forward for the rest of the season. Antonio Gibson is out for the season. Terrell Jennings and Ramondre Stevenson are dealing with injuries. So there is a strong chance Trey operates as the running back 1 for New England out of necessity for at least another week. And I'm willing to bet big that Henderson cements himself as a franchise running back over the next 2 weeks and doesn't look back. Why? Because the 8-2 Patriots have a cakewalk of a schedule coming up. They play the Jets this week, then the Bengals and the Giants, which are both allowing his first and second most rush yards per game. And then for the fantasy football playoffs, TreVeyon faces the Bills, Ravens, and Jets. The Bills and Jets both being at the bottom of the league in run defense. There is a chance that the Pats find a way to nerf Henderson when this backfield is healthy, but this guy was a borderline first-round pick in this year's draft and is finally starting to show us what he can do in the NFL. Trading for TreVeyon Henderson is an educated risk with potentially a league-winning reward. Pivoting to Henderson's OSU running mate, Quinshon Judkins. I know Judkins has been underwhelming for fantasy these past 2 weeks, but he is a true workhorse running back for the Cleveland Browns, and we buy the dip so we can win our fantasy leagues. He currently has the 12th most carries in the NFL with missing week 1 and already having his bye week. Without the absence in week 1 and without that bye week, it's safe to say that Judkins would be in the top 5 to 8 amongst running backs for carries. The thing with Judkins is that we've already seen what he's capable of. He's had 3 top 11 weekly finishes at the running back position in PPR this season, including a 3 touchdown game against Miami. And now he faces a second easiest strength of schedule for running backs with 3 juicy matchups between weeks 14 and 16, just in time for the fantasy playoffs. Volume is king for fantasy football. Players that touch the ball produce starter-worthy performances, but players that touch the ball with the talent of Judkins produce league-winning performances. Adding to the argument for Judkins, in recent years, we've seen highly touted rookie running backs fail to find that high-end, consistent fantasy success till the end of their rookie seasons. Take Jahmyr Gibbs and Bucky Irving for recent examples. We've already seen the explosiveness and usage from Judkins. So now is when we can expect him to find that consistency that against what is a favorable schedule. So go out and trade for him so you can reap the benefits to end your season. Next up, I'm going to briefly touch on Chase Brown. Chase Brown has been a disappointment for where he was drafted. There is no doubt about that. But over the past few weeks, we've seen some promising production, and he's trending in the right direction, especially these past 2 outings where he finishes the RB5 and the RB6. A big reason for this recent success is that Joe Flacco is a competent QB for Cincinnati, and this defense is still abysmal. So Chase Brown is a do-it-all type of running back who generated immense value both in fantasy and in real life last season, which is why he was an early pick in this year's drafts. I like Chase Brown as a trade candidate right now, regardless of which Joe is in at quarterback, because we know he's found running back 1 production with both, and he has a very favorable schedule coming up. If you're looking for an upgrade at running back 2, aim for Chase Brown, who finished as a PPR RB10 last season, and you can do this without honestly having to break the bank. The next running back is not a one-man league winner, but he can be a very valuable asset, especially in deeper PPR leagues, and that is Tyjae Spears. The Titans are really bad, and as a result, they find themselves playing from behind more often than not. This game script works in the favor of Tyjae Spears, who brings that receiving threat that Tony Pollard doesn't. In the Titans' past 4 games, Tyjae and Pollard have had a nearly 50-50 snap count split, with Spears actually out-snapping Pollard in 2 of those games. In 3 of those games, we saw Spears finish as a top 25 running back, including a 17.2 PPR point performance, finishing him as the RB8 in PPR. Coming out of the bye week, I think we're going to see way more Spears than Pollard, considering they've been trending that direction anyway, and the Titans should still be down more often than not. Spears is only owned by 52% of teams on Sleeper. If you play in a 12-plus man PPR league, there's no reason why he should not be rostered. And if he's rostered, he is a prime high IQ buy low candidate that could be a really strong flex option with upside for the rest of the season. So now let's pivot to some wide receivers. And first up, we have someone who it feels like the NFL community has forgotten about, and that is Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall has been out since week 5 with a really confusing knee injury, but between weeks 1 and 4, he posted 200-plus yard receiving games, and in week 3, he finished as the PPR wide receiver 11 with 19.7 points. He was also top 5 in receiving yards amongst all NFL players through the first 4 weeks of the season. If you didn't know, Pearsall was a first-round pick last season, hand-selected by offensive guru Kyle Shanahan, and that same offseason, he was shot in the chest, causing him to miss a good chunk of his rookie campaign. But in the final 2 weeks of the season, he went off, finishing as the PPR wide receiver 7 in week 17. If you take those 2 games and the first 4 games of this season, Pearsall surpassed 100 yards 3 times. We have a big enough sample size to know that this guy's a baller and can contribute to your fantasy team. The Niners are winning games and they're making things work, but it is clear that they're missing a go-to target in that wide receiver room on a weekly basis. Pearsall will solve that problem when he's back on the field, and he should be back on the field over the next couple weeks. If your team that's sitting pretty right now is locked in for the playoffs, Pearsall is a phenomenal buy low candidate to stash for the playoffs. Pearsall really offers that high upside as a flex and could potentially even upgrade to a high-end wide receiver 2, especially in PPR come fantasy football playoff time. Next up, we have Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka started his rookie season off hot, but then cooled off between weeks 6 and 8, finishing as a PPR wide receiver 71, 33, and 55 in each respective week. On top of that, he's only finished as a top 24 weekly wide receiver 4 times this season, but in those 4 weeks, he didn't just finish as a top 24 receiver, he finished in the top 12, with 3 of those being top 4 finishes. We all know how great this rookie looks, but why is he on this list? He is on this list because his remaining opponents are actually comical, and we should see more top 12 finishes the rest of the season than him finishing outside of the top 30. Between weeks 13 and 18, he faces Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami, Carolina, with 4 of those games being at home. On top of that, Baker Mayfield is playing the best football of his career right now, and Egbuka is his wide receiver 1. We still have Mike Evans, who's out for most of the season, Chris Godwin doing God knows what, and Jalen McMillan out, and Berkey Irving with no set return date. Egbuka is going to see insane volume like he's been seeing all season, and he's going to put up monster numbers to end the season, so you're going to want him on your team for the rest of the season, especially for the playoffs. The last wide receiver on this list is Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle was one of my biggest wide receiver fades this past summer, and my take honestly held strong until Tyreek Hill went down for the year. Since Tyreek's injury in week 4, Waddle has finished as a top 20 PPR wide receiver 4 times with 2 top 8 finishes. Waddle's talent is shining as the only premium receiving threat in Miami for Tua that is not named Achane. Similar to Egbuka, Waddle faces a joke of a schedule for the remainder of the season, which is the main reason I think we should be trading for him as a really strong wide receiver 2 rest of the season with weekly wide receiver 1 upside. He gets to face Washington this week, and then after the bye, he sees New Orleans, the Jets, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Tampa Bay. That stretch of games between weeks 13 and 17 alone make the uber-talented Waddle must-add for the final act of the season. Similar to Egbuka, Waddle is going to see a boatload of targets on a talent-lacking Dolphins wide receiver room. With Tyreek Hill and Darren Waller out, the only guys on this offense seeing significant work in the pass game are Waddle, Malik Washington, and Achane. Bank on the matchups and the volume for Waddle and let him feast for you. The sole quarterback on this list is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is expected to return sooner than we thought. The Bengals are targeting a Week 13 return for their superstar quarterback. This Bengals defense has proved to be absolutely atrocious once again this season, forcing this offense to carry the weight of this team and put up points. This sucks for Bengals fans, but it is a blessing for fantasy footballers that have Bengals on their team. In Burrow's absence, the other Joe Flacco, has averaged a whopping 25.5 points per game. Now you plug in the better Joe, and depending on his health, 25.5 points per game could be the floor with the schedule that he's set to face upon returning, especially in the fantasy playoffs. In Week 15, Burrow faces a Ravens defense allowing the 6th most passing yards a game and the 8th most points per game. In Week 16, he goes to Miami, which has been a dream matchup for offenses for most of this season. And then Week 17, he gets the Cardinals at home. Don't forget that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase single-handedly won people fantasy leagues at the end of last year. Burrow is rostered on less than 65% of teams on Yahoo, ESPN, and Sleeper. If that's the case in one of your leagues, you need to stash him. And if you're a playoff team that could use an upgrade at quarterback for your playoff run, go out and trade for Joe Burrow. Finally, I want to briefly touch on 2 guys that are really just buy-high players that I think could single-handedly carry you to the promised land. These guys are not going to be cheap by any means, but if you need to take a swing, then these are your guys. So first up is Trey McBride. Trey McBride is currently the tight end 1 in fantasy, finishing as a tight end 2, tight end 1, tight end 6, and tight end 1 in his previous 4 outings, posting 20-plus PPR points in 3 of those games. Kyler Murray was placed on IR last week, which is going to keep him out for at least 3 more weeks. In his absence, Jacoby Brissett has been feeding McBride, making him a league winner at the tight end position. He's going to continue to get fed as the Cardinals' offensive focal point, regardless of game script and who is in at quarterback. If you're tight end away from domination and have depth to trade away, snag McBride for a massive weekly advantage. And then finally, Achane. Achane has been a top 3 fantasy running back this season regardless of how the Dolphins look on a week-to-week basis. His weekly floor is basically the RB12 with the RB1 ceiling. The versatility he brings as a runner and pass catcher is the winning formula for fantasy running backs when you're as elite as Achane is on both fronts. And back to the schedule I shared for his teammate Jaylen Waddle, it is extremely exploitable, which should sustain Achane as a top 3 running back to end the season. Obviously, this is a major buy high, but I just wanted to throw him in here for y'all because he could single-handedly go out and win your league in this final stretch of games this season. So that right there is 11 high upside players that you're going to want for the defining act of the fantasy football season. Use the comment section below to drop your trade questions and your top trade targets for the fantasy community. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching, and I will catch y'all later.